Great, you're going to get probably a notification to. Okay, great. So the changes in how, especially how discovery was going to be paid and going to be organized, were coming prior to the aware change. And then, with the aware change, customized employment services, the way I understand it is, those used to happen kind of outside the digital authorization system, and now they're within it now. So if you're offering customized employment, you've probably noticed that. So we wanted to talk about a few of the adjustments that here comes Nancy, that you're going to bump into. So the first thing we want to talk about is and it's still a little bit tricky in Florida, but so discovery is the first part of customized employment. So one way to maybe a metaphor to view customized employment, it's its own thing. Like, people receive customized employment services, and it's kind of an umbrella service. Within that, there are three phases essentially. Well, there's four phases here. Three phases that typically VR is involved in, whether Florida VR or Michigan VR, California VR. And so that's the first phase, which is discovery, or our Griffin Hammonds's version, discovering personal genius. The second piece is customized job development. So discovery is an alternative to assessment, figuring out who the person is. It's strengths-based, capacity-based, competency-based, contribution-based, right? Figure out, you get to know the person, ideal conditions of employment, 3 vocational themes, depending on what version you're using. Discovery being the first service under that customized employment umbrella, which we'll talk about. The assumption is that discovery will lead to the next part, which is job development. And then in customized employment, we don't use a labor market approach towards job development. So instead of doing job finding or where are the jobs, who's hiring, the idea is we're taking the information that we learned during discovery, and that information, using the 3 themes in our version, that's how you target business engagement. That's how you identify business. We don't care if people are hiring or not, right? We go to businesses using typically social networking, social capital, relationships approaches, and then we want to find out the needs of each business or employer, and then try to negotiate or create a job, a one-off, restructure the tasks, add products or services, that kind of stuff. So that's again typical. If you think of in the traditional services, there's like a figuring out the job goal, right, which was traditionally kind of assessments or that kind of stuff, interest inventories, all that. So our alternative is discovery. And then the second phase, which is job development, typically, right? In our version, that's customized job development. And then the third phase, which is typically called like job coaching in general. We have our own version of that too, which we can, there's a couple of trainings coming up for customized employment. We can talk about that during the conversations at a later date. But so there's figuring out the work goal, right? And then there's the job development and securing the job. And then there's like day one and beyond supports that VRs will typically fund. And we call that consultative employment training and supports. Those three, discovery, which is 1, customized job development 2, engaging employment supports or consultative employment and training supports, like those are essentially the 3, they comprise customized employment. None of those stand individually in the Fidelity, the best practices approach. And then what happens once the person hits job stabilization, stability, that's typically when, the discussion of extended support, right? You've had that conversation, hopefully, the whole way through, so you know what's going to happen. But that point is usually when if it's Medicaid supports, if it's kind of private pay or just natural supports, where they'll take over, right? And that's typically where the VR system stops its payment of services and something else jumps in. Ongoing supports, career development, follow along, that kind of stuff. So, this is something that has, when we say then and now, then in Florida, and in many other places too. And I think the reason it was like this in Florida is that Florida was a first mover into customized employment. I can't tell you, I wasn't here. Maybe Nancy's here. Maybe Nancy, you can share, or somebody else. I'm not sure exactly when like customized employment was started to get funded, but it was way before customized employment got added to WIOA, where it was way before it was in the Rehab Act.
Yeah, so Michael Callahan's group started with uh, the professor at the college in South Georgia. And then Beth Keaton came in and did work. And then we had a few grants. You may remember Rural Routes to Employment. And that's where we really began to show what's possible. And then there was the Employment First Collaborative Team grant. So, and that's where we learn leadership has got to be a part of the process. So I don't know if that helped or not, Russell, but that's a little bit of that history.
So probably like in the aughts sometime in the 2000s when and then and I'm going to say the wrong date probably, but customized employment was added to WIOA in 2014, 2016. Sorry, Nancy, I know you know that. I get that date wrong. 2016 or 2014?
It was signed into law under President Obama in 2014 and amended in 2016. And that was the first time that customized employment became part of the Federal Register. And then in 2016, it was defined, and many people find this a little bit confusing, but it was defined as a part or the overarching heading after community integrated employment is supported employment, and then customized employment falls under supported employment.
Yeah, so it's embedded in there. So so that's just to say the timing that customized employment was first, I think, defined maybe in 2001, 2002, the ODEP grants. And because of Florida's partnership with Mark Golden Associates, Mike Callahan, and Griffin Hammis, y'all started implementing this service before it was actually put into the federal law. So the reason I just want to put it into context is it's understandable, that when you do that at the time, we didn't know what we know now, right? We've learned a lot in the interim about how it's best to implement customized employment. What are the quality standards? What works for best practices, evidence-based practices, and what doesn't. So I just want to, when I share kind of the changes, it's understandable that as time passes, we learn, and it's awesome that Florida, I want to be, is like, let's do it, let's get started, right? Let's figure out how to do this now. You don't have to wait for things to be perfect, right? It's good enough. And so that's what happened. And that was using the best understanding that we had at the time. And then we've learned from since then. So in the past, and we'll talk about it in the next slide, and it's still kind of in there a little bit, in the policy, discovery was seen as kind of its own thing, so, or as a discrete service, as a standalone. And so what we've learned is that, let's go to the next slide, is that discovery isn't its own thing when you talk about it in customized employment, right? Discovery, when you say discovery within the context of customized employment, you're talking about the first step. By definition, there must be steps 2 and step 3, right? So discovery is not its own thing. And when you're talking about it under the umbrella of customized employment, the service of customized employment, discovery is where you start. But it assumes that it's going to lead to the next piece. Like it's built in that discovery must lead to customized job development. So it's not something that we can say, oh, we're just going to do discovery and then see what happens.
And Russell, if I could add, part of, whenever you are doing such a major change, and of course, all of this is based on data. It's not just deciding, oh, let's try this or that. All that was in the initial phases when we thought it was a promising practice, then it became a trend and then an evidence-based practice, and now practice that is used around the country and is written into law. But initially, as you might expect, myths can develop and confusion regarding what is the proper process or protocol. And so early on in the grant that Russell and I were a part of, the Employment First grant, there were individuals who saw discovery as an entity unto itself, as Russell said, and they had contracted with VR just to provide discovery. And so part of what we think might have been contributing was that we would often say discovery and customized employment. Well, of course, that sounds like two separate services, and we realized we need to use the word customized employment to encapsulate all of those methodologies under discovery. So if you come upon information from the past where someone said, well, no, we provided discovery, that was the service we provided, then you'll know what that's all about.
Yeah. And that's something, it's a work in progress, just and something that it's just, we have to learn how to, when we're having conversations, that we understand we're talking about customized employment, and then part A, subheading, discovery, under customized employment, instead of saying, oh, we do discovery services, like Nancy's saying. It's like, well, technically, like that's the first step, but it's really what you're doing is customized employment. So and again, like it's a process, but ideally the funding would say, it'd say customized employment, dash discovery, customized employment dash customized job development, customized employment dash our version of post day one supports, consultative employment training and supports. So it's a conceptual shift. It'll take some time, but so just FYI, and we're starting with discovery, because I think that's the main, talking about that today, because that's one of the main kind of shifts, or the main changes from then and now. We're talking about that, but we'll talk about all the other pieces as well. So just a reminder, and this has always been a part of discovery since the beginning. And to steal Mike Callahan's line, which I think is brilliant, when you're doing traditional assessments or evaluations, they have a tendency, they tend to be quantitative, kind of use judgments, assertions, conclusions, like that kind of stuff.
Compared to a norm.
They're comparative. Yep. So they're comparative. And then what you do with those comparisons is use that information to predict, right? So to predict what'll work best, or what job will work best, or and it's worst case, if somebody can work or not, right? And so what we're saying, and again, this is Mike Callahan's line, instead of comparing and predicting, what discovery is doing, or customized employment is doing in the first part, which is discovery, is you're trying to understand and then translate. So you're just being, that's what we say, that discovery or customized employment is not quantitative. You're not measuring. You're not saying good, bad, fast, slow. There's other ways to see the same thing and describe it in different ways. Is just tell us what happened, right? That's a qualitative, it's a descriptive process. No judgments, right? You're just sharing information. It's just about finding information and sharing information. Because typically what happens in customized employment, most people who find themselves in customized employment are folks where they're either not understood in a way that kind of matches with work at all, right? So it's like, we don't even know really what the first step is, or how to even serve the person well. Or they've tried traditional approaches and they haven't worked out, or they keep pointing to, will not benefit or cannot work, right? Those approaches don't give you the information to take the next step. And we understand that if we just, if we just describe people based on, using those measurements, those traditional measurements, those traditional comparisons, norm reference kind of stuff. We understand and then try to push people through the labor market process, the HR process. We understand that people that come to customize employment, like that's not the best way for their best selves to be known, right? That all it's going to do is highlight what doesn't work for the person, right? When you're, it's always like an asterisk comparative to whatever the norm is. And people are going to get stuck in the, in the qualification experience trap. They just, that when you understand people through that, like job requirements, job descriptions, all it's going to do is highlight what the person hasn't had a chance to experience, right? And so discovery, that the reason, one of the things we say is you have to believe in order to see, right? It sounds kind of maybe a little silly, but there's a faith-based component just in that you understand that, like, all people, like if you're a human being, then you have it, right? You have the stuff, it's there, that will help you be a quality employee. You may not, like, if you've never worked, well, then by definition, how can you compete with somebody who has work experience, right? Like, so we're not going to try to do that. We're going to find another way.
And Russell, if I could do
Yeah.
just a quick analogy that I just find so intriguing. Early on, when Europeans were finding what the Native Americans already had found, and initially there would be boats on the horizon, and the Native Americans did not see them because they didn't have a template in their head for what that looked like and what it was. And that happens to us in our own life. That was just a kind of an extreme example. So look for what we often don't see.
Yep. And yeah, that's great. And so that's the idea is that we get stuck on what hasn't worked, right? We get kind of mesmerized by the difficulties that are described by, if somebody shares any kind of reporting or evaluation they've done previously, typically, there's not a lot of positive stuff in there, and so what discovery says is, if you assume employability, that if customized employment and all discovery is figuring out who this person is, then people can't fail being themselves, right? That's why there's no reject, policy. Like, Nancy cannot fail at being Nancy, right? I can't fail at being me. It's our job as professionals to understand the person, and get to know people that love them and support them in their lives. Just like all of us, some things work in certain environments and certain times of day, when certain things are present, or people or places, and sometimes things don't work, right? So what we say is, let's figure out what does work and move towards that, right? Use that information to take the next step. So without the assumption of employability, you have to have, that's the believe in order to see, there's just too many outs along the way, because we don't know the answer. We can't, like Nancy or I, we've been doing this for a long time, and Denise as well. None of us would ever say, oh, we meet somebody and spend even like the first part of discovery and say, oh, we know what would work for you. Like, we'll never say that. We'll never say we know what the answer is or what the job is, right? We don't predict. We can't, that's not a part of this process. The part of discovery is getting to know people, figuring out the good stuff, right? How people are awesome, what works for them, people that, what the endearing, engaging qualities are, how they can, what they like to do, how they spend their time, tasks, interests, skills, that kind of stuff. And then just follow that stuff. And then the idea is, and it works, is that the opportunities, the options, the possibilities will be revealed to you. And that's really what the vocational themes are, again, which we'll talk about that at another one of these conversations. So that, I think that's I think that can be confusing sometimes too, to make that switch. Whereas if in the past discovery had been used maybe to find somebody can't benefit from services, that's just that is that's not a possible outcome with discovery. We would just say if you're at that conclusion, we would just say, well, discovery's not over. We keep going, right? Like it definitely is there, right? Maybe, and usually what happens if we look back at what's been done, likely there haven't been quality processes used. So literally, like all this stuff is just, it's really tools for us to help the person see a vision of a work future, right? So literally, like discovery is not over till we find that. Okay, last slide, and then we'll open it up. I think we've already said most of this stuff. So so the assumption is discovery is the first step in customized employment, and it will always lead to the next step. And I kind of, when I look at this now, there may be a bit of an error, like it leads to customized job development in the wage sense, or leads to business development, or both in an ideal world. So I know that like Florida is definitely way ahead of the country in terms of self-employment supports. We'll talk, Sonia will help us, and Monica will talk about that. Right now, I don't know that there's a lot of self-employment happening that's been tied to discovery, like official paid discovery. And I think that because the focus of the traditional training has been wage employment, and self-employment is a whole other skill set. But I think that's what, or helping somebody, build a business plan, look into business ideas. What I'm really hopeful is that Artsy will give us the forum to pull what's called the CBTAC or CBTAC, which folks hopefully know about. It's Certified Business Technical Assistance Consultant. Oh my gosh. Yeah, just a rough acronym there. But would love to, the idea that's kind of existed over here. And there is a mini discovery piece of it, that's built into the training, but not the formal approach. But what we tell people when we meet them is, that, hey, you're an adult typically, or transitioning in terms of from school to adulthood. There's really two ways to make a living, or three. You're on a wage, you're on somebody's payroll, or you're self-employed, or you're both, right? So we really feel strongly it's a part of customized employment that we feel like people should have the information, to make an informed choice. And one of the choices is that self-employment is an option. It's not for everybody, of course, at any given time, but discovery could lead to job development or self-employment. So leads to work, leads to employment.
Russell, if we could interject the power of resource ownership under wage employment. Do you want to?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
So and we should do a separate series just on that, on conversations. But so somebody working with in Michigan has negotiated a job, and one of his tasks, one of his responsibilities is going to be to do a vlogging, or I was calling it podcasting, but it's video blogging. So like if you watch any of the bloggers, I listen to it on my phone on podcasts, but they're all also usually they're recording themselves, and sometimes go out live, or sometimes they go up on whatever you find, that YouTube usually, I think. And so this place where he got hired, that's something that when we did informational interview, they said, hey, we'd really love to, to get be a way to market our services and highlight kind of our customers, what we do here, and it'd be something that we really love to do. And the guy that we were facilitating the job development, customized job development, it was something he kind of did on the side, mainly about NBA basketball, which is really interesting to me. I like that part, but not necessarily what they would be doing there. But he had some experience doing that. He didn't have access because, if you receive SSI and Medicaid, you can't have tons of nice things, of course. But he knew a little bit about it. And so right now, tomorrow I have a call. We're doing research, but the deal is that he could work there and do some other stuff. But one of his tasks would be if he can bring the video equipment, computer, microphone, all that kind of stuff. And one of his responsibilities is going to be to bring a podcast or video blog. And VR is buying him the tools or equipment that he's using on the job to do that. It's part of his duties. It'd be like if you're a welder, buying somebody a welding big magic, but a welder. So that idea is that, well, hey, we'd love to offer this service or this product. I'm not sure what you call that. It's a product or service, but they don't have the equipment themselves, and it's not hugely expensive, but so he's going to bring that with him as part of his job. That's part of the negotiation, right? And this person's he's probably 40 something years old, has never worked, right? When he's applied forever. He's a brilliant guy, just like everybody is. Everybody's brilliant, right? In multiple ways. But he bumps into that. Well, we like you, but how do we know it'll work here? Like what have you've never worked before. So how do we know, how to figure things out? That's typically what happens is businesses, they want to make things work. They just aren't sure how to do it in a way that works. So, just trying to figure that out is part of the process. And customized job development, resource ownership can be a really, really cool tool. It's a way to, it's kind of an entrepreneurial approach towards job development, but it's a wage job, though, not self-employment.
And Russell, if I could add, one thing that we speak about a lot is we're not just placing people in jobs and that's static. We are looking at the work we do as economic development. That is the best practice structure under which we work. So it's not just placing someone in a job. It's not even placing someone in a job. And that sounds so disrespectful. It's looking at also the living wage and additional education, or certificates, or training that people might need. So we really work more with the economic development folks. And it doesn't mean the labor market approach is bad at all. Many people find that meets their needs, but we realized, as Russell said, in those early 2000s, when we began looking at, there is a whole population of folks who are missing out on being able to contribute and be a part of the workforce. And so that is how much of this developed. Also, we looked to progressive businesses. The work of resource ownership is not new. And sometimes folks have a hard time with being able to see the disability work in a more general light of people having working lives and contributing through taxes and all of those meaningful lives. That has happened many times. You may know more in your forefront of thoughts, although there are many more ways this happens, is mechanics bring tools often. Chefs bring knives. So we've taken this notion and added it to this work we do. And the other piece about that is it also expands options for communities. So through this, a new resource has been made available that had not been available. And just a real quick example of someone I got to work with his team. And you can go on the Griffin Hammis website and see Brian's story. So his going through discovery, identifying that working with dogs, and we talked about it in a bigger theme, but just to be quick to tell the story. And it was grounded in something in his past where he had developed these skills and interest. So he was able to bring equipment to the business. It was lifts, so heavy dogs could be pneumatically lifted on this table. It was a comb that sucked up the hair as you combed it, and some other things. That cost $4,000. Prior to that, Brian has a history. One of the tests that was comparative, that really gave us no information we could work from. It just told us what Brian couldn't do and where he ranks with people his age and that it resulted in a developmental disability diagnosis. One of the tests was $20,000 and it offered nothing. Brian is still in that job. This was the early 2000s. Over 20 years later, he is still in that job and has taken on additional responsibilities. He has come out of this kind of protective in way of interacting with people because he's had successes. He has a valued role as Wolfensberger would say, it's a socially valued role. So, and I could go on and on, but I'm going to stop myself.
Awesome. Cool. So that's the piece is that customized employment discovery always leads to customized job development or business development. We mentioned this earlier about how it's not a standalone service. So the implication then is, and this is a change, I think, and this is, again, we're speaking from Griffin Hammis Associates from the trainer's perspective, right? Griffin Hammis doesn't control what happens on the ground or what funders do or what providers do. But Griffin Hammis, like, we cannot teach anybody customized employment if they only want to do discovery. And best practices definitely, evidence-based practices definitely indicate that you can't do discovery and then hand off the report to somebody who doesn't know the person, right? One of the major pieces of discovery is, to develop that understanding of who the person is, there's that relationship building piece, the spending time with them, being with them while they're doing stuff, problem solving, figuring out how to teach the person best, right? How they learn best supports, how the person's best supported. All of that, I think, even if you were the greatest poet of all time, you cannot transfer that information in words only, even if you were like Walt Whitman or whomever. Like there's knowledge and there's wisdom experience that you've learned experientially and a comfortability, right, with the individual, with their primary supports, with the people you met along the way. It cannot be only conveyed in whether vocational profile or even a great video, right? Because when you're doing customized job development, the job developer has to be able to credibly speak on the person's behalf, especially when you're doing like first contacts or when you're facilitating informational interviews. It would not work at all for a job developer to say, well, in their discovery report, it says they did this, right? But I didn't do it with them, so I can just tell you what they did. That just will not work for businesses. You will have no credibility. What we say is that businesses want to hire people. They just aren't sure how to make it work. Like our job is to help them, solve those issues, right? Or figure it out. Not to say figure it out yourself, based on, I'll just tell you X, Y, and Z. Like we're a part of that negotiation. We're a part of that conversation. We're part of that. Like, let's, we're not sure. Let's try it out. Like we know I did this X, Y, and Z, or we did it together. We think it'll work, but hey, maybe we should, try a few things here, so I can speak knowledgeably about our experience and project a bit on that, but I know how to support them well. And maybe we should, we'll spend a couple hours here trying out a task or two. You can't, if you don't have that background knowledge, you cannot make that, you cannot predictably, make good judgments about, or support the person to make good judgments about what comes next, if that makes sense. So it's just crucial. And then the trust, the relationship that, families have often had bad experiences or not great experiences, so we've had, it's happened many times, where a parent's been like, yeah, we tried that, whatever. Like you're saying the same thing that the other person said, and they just took off or whatever, it didn't work out. So why will this work? So people start where they say that with good reason. So they've had some families that oftentimes, primary supports have had some tough experiences. And so part of the process of discovery that leads into customized job development is showing them, that I'm committed, right? That I will be with you till we finish this journey, this employment journey, right? So that trust that's built, how to communicate best with the family, with the supports, historical context you learn along the way. It can't be replicated, so it just can't happen well. And so that's why and again, when we say it's not standalone, like we can't, like if we talk to people who come to our training and they say, I just want to get trained and do the discovery piece, like in Griffin Hammond, we just respectfully say, well, that's not something we can do, because the evidence doesn't point to that leading. All customized employment's about work, ultimately. It's a way to help people, the straightest way to help folks who've been kind of alienated from work to figure that out. And so discovery really is meaningless if it doesn't, if it's about work, discovery that ends there, just doesn't, is not gonna be in that person's best interests.
Russell, if I could end on a couple of
Yeah.
comments as we open it up for questions, and I'll be real quick. Russell and I are so passionate about this, we really could talk about it nonstop. But the piece that's critical, one criticism you will hear is that it takes so long. If you dig into that, though, you find that the person is working with the job seeker maybe once a month. Because of all the other responsibilities they have. And so we realized we had done a lot of work with helping people learn the process, but we had not looked at the system holistically. So that involves how people are hired. There are certain competencies based on the work we did with the Office of Disability Employment Policy under the Department of Labor. Individuals who are more successful in achieving customized employment outcomes, there are certain traits, and we look to hire people who have those traits, like treating others with respect and dignity, and that's operationalized. We would want to hire someone who does that. That's part of our values. Teaching someone the methodology, it's okay if the person doesn't have those skill sets. We can train them on that. So what we realized is that we had to look at all the systems, especially leadership. I can remember feeling so alone when I was the director, and being able to bring to the table those things that can be struggles. And it's that people have to be freed up to do this work. A learning curve is the process that they're in. And if they're always pulled out to take care of the latest crisis that happened that day, it is going to take a long time. So we need folks to work weekly with individuals. And if they go through the process and have that time almost identified as holy, and restructure the organization to allow for folks learning. And it's not just customized employment, it's best practices and person-centeredness, for example. And so creating an environment that supports training and then practicing the training and putting it into effect is critical. The other piece is that we realized, as folks were saying, a variety of things about why they don't like customized employment. And we dug into it. We realized they're being asked to do something that they have never done. It's almost like they can't see the boat because they don't have a template in their head. So being able to have a fidelity scale that shows, okay, if you were on the home visit, these are the points that we look for to show that this was quality work, it met the minimal standards, or it did not meet the standards. And while that can be scary when you hear fidelity standards, because you think, oh, I'm going to be compared and get a rating, it's not that at all. It's to help people figure out and dig into details so specific that they can see, oh, I did not do that. And when I've done the fidelity scale review with individuals, again, they said, oh, I didn't even think about that. Yes, I do need to do that. So again, it's that comforting. And I wish we had had fidelity scales when I was going through this, because it would save a lot of heartache and just kind of meandering. So I'm so sorry, Russell, I may have gone too long,
That's
but
great. Great. Yeah, that's awesome. So the only other piece, and then we'll open it up and maybe Denise ask you to share, is, and this is not new, but is a little different than some trainings, is that the customized employment, the ability to deliver, to implement customized employment is exists. It's in the staff. You know, you can't train an organization. An organization is an abstraction. You know, it's not. It can't understand how to deliver a service. So it's the staff, and this isn't new. As long as we've been providing training, you understand that the staff have the expertise, not the organization. So organizations can best support and with the leadership management styles, that kind of stuff. But the ability to understand and do customized employment is demonstrated by the staff. So cool. So any before we ask Denise to share, any questions? Nobody jumped in. I don't know if I was clear. Like, feel free to during these, you can just interrupt me, just like, hey, or you can chat. You know, put something in the chat. I'm going to put my my email in there, and just so if you have any ideas that you'd like, you know, for other conversations, we'd love to hear that. But are there any questions, thoughts, perspectives?
I just wanted to jump in real quick, Russell. Thank you, and both you and Nancy, for providing this webinar. I think it's very informative, especially because so much has changed with discovery and customized employment. And I definitely like the idea of how discovery leads into customized employment, which is something that was not looked at in that model in the past. Many times I remember as a counselor in the past, we conducted discovery and then it was kind of like, okay, that was it. No employment was, there was no successful employment outcome out of it. But I do appreciate the fidelity model, the skill that is being utilized at this time, because it does bring us back to connecting the dots to get the individual to successfully find that employment. And again, it's a service that and it's giving us, I guess, the promise that anyone can work if we practice this model, and there's going to be a good, successful outcome out of it. So I appreciate that. Thank you for providing that information.
Yeah,
Thank
sure.
you. And that's the beautiful piece. We're collaborating, aren't we, Myrna? And it takes all of us to get it right.
Yes, exactly. We are collaborating, and I think it takes a team effort to, you know, to have the same goal. And if we do that, then obviously there will be a successful outcome at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I just wanted, so VR is obviously like probably the most important stakeholder, because the system and the services flow through that. And Nancy and I are mentors, and then Denise, I think one of the things we love to do with these conversations is try to pull providers, people who are delivering the service, and hear from them, because I just think it's I think it's funny, like, when I say something like all means all, or nobody's unemployed. I just don't want that. I don't want you to think. I just think if we don't have somebody like Denise here who's doing it in Florida, I think that it becomes a slogan. Like, it's just, oh yeah, that's easy to say, Russell, but you're not here in Florida. You know what I mean? And so I think like having like Sonia, who will be in future ones, and Denise here, I think is super important, because these are all, these are just bullet points, and the nuances, the details are the important stuff. So Denise, from a provider's perspective, how do I know, like, if those changes happen, like discovery, if the assumption is like discovery will always lead to job development, right? Does that change, or how, I guess, what does that mean? Or do is that something that that you feel? I mean, I know you because you've been always doing it like that, but I guess how does that impact out from a provider's perspective? If that makes sense. Oh, can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think it will ever really change because when you're doing discovery, that's the purpose of discovery is to eventually find the individual the right customized employment for them. And a lot of times, you know, when you first start working with individuals with disabilities, some people may say, you know, just by looking at an individual, and I know this isn't very nice to say, but, you know, just by looking at them and saying, oh, they're not going to be able to do this, or they wouldn't be able to do that, or whatever. But that's the purpose of discovery because you really get to know the individual. You get to know their families, you go to their home and you visit with them and you get to know what see what they do at home, how they interact with their family members, with their pets, with all, just in their neighbors, like in their neighborhood, when you go out and you search like their neighborhood and you go to places like that they're familiar with, say like a church or just shopping, in a store. And like in my area here in Citrus County, it's kind of a close-knit sort of community. And like one of the individuals that I'm working with now, he wanted to go to a pet store simply because he has a pet, a dog that he dearly loves. And once we got into the pet store, there were other people there that he knew from his past when he was like a more of a child, going through school, where now he's a young man. But it was just so interesting because then they caught up with one another and they started talking about like, when he was little and the different things that he was interested in and what was he doing there now. And then it seemed like it really helped him feel more comfortable because he was kind of he's a very good, like where he looks at you, he was always taught to be respectful and keep good eye contact, and which a lot of the individuals that we work with, they don't necessarily do that, but this young man does. And it just seemed like it kind of brought him out of a shell. Like then when people were coming in the store with their pets, he'd say, oh, what a beautiful dog you have. And then those people, they would just like lighten up, their faces would light up and they say, well, thank you, because they were really surprised. They were bringing the dog in there, say, like to get it groomed. But it was just so neat to watch him, how he kind of really unfolded as an individual. And that was just one of the places, that we decided to visit just because of, his dog there at home. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to do that just to see what it would be like. Yeah. So, I mean, Discovery, it's really I just always feel like it's kind of like a service where you don't judge people. It's just kind of like we shouldn't judge people. And you really get to know them and know what their interests are and what, things that they could be afraid of or, that just wouldn't work at all for them. Yeah. But then other things that, that where they really excel in and sometimes it's really little things that at first you kind of don't even pick up on, but as you continue with the individual, it might even reflect back to you, oh yeah, he said he was interested in that, let's pursue this avenue. And another thing that we went to with this young man is we went to he loves Batman and he loves all of the superheroes. So we went to a comic book store, and there again, when we first started, he was very reserved, and he was helping the guy like files comic books and things. But as people started coming in the store, and he heard their conversations where they were talking about like Comic Con events and dressing up, he loves to dress up as Batman. And so things like that. And then before you knew it, he was in a conversation right with them. It was just amazing, how they have all these different details, in common. And how it just
And
really
Denise, I love your story because it's in community where real life happens, right?
Right.
So why would we not, with relationships and being in community, choose that to be the place where we get to know the person and find out their skills, interests tied to work? And that wouldn't have happened in an office where you're doing an assessment. I have done those assessments, from IQ testing to adaptive to checklist. And boy, I have to be honest, when people left, I thought, oh, that was a waste of time. I do not know this person any more than when they walked in. So you demonstrate that so beautifully, and it creates an opportunity to be where the folks hang out who are tied to the same interests that he has.
And it's a great example of like you have to believe in order to see. Like, I don't know that you can necessarily like plan stuff like that, like some of the stuff is kind of spontaneous, and it's stuff you'll learn when you we say go to places that make sense. That when I say like things will be revealed to you, like that's the magic of it, I think, which all it means is like you increase the probability of going to places that fit the person. And when you go to places that fit the person, it's much more likely you're going to bump into old acquaintances or something that's interesting to the person will engage their attention, right? And they'll jump into it, or you'll learn a nuance or a bit of the person maybe you haven't seen in that full way before. So that's it's again, it's kind of like what we've learned over time is that if that judgmental approach, Denise, had worked for the person, like they'd be working, right? Like all that stuff that maybe has been tried in the past, it's led to where we are now. There's not much you can do with the stuff that doesn't work because for the person, or what, the quote unquote, the negative stuff or whatever. You don't build jobs around what doesn't work for people. You build jobs around what people can do, what works for people. And so yeah, so I think that, and sometimes like it is not, you're not, when you first meet the person, you're not quite sure, right? What that is, right? And that's what the discovery customized employment process does, is it gives us a methodology, a process where we'll be with them while you go to the pet store, and when they bump into people they knew and have these conversations, and those, I think I like it's like where the magic happens,
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. Well, we're past time actually. So, does anybody have any questions or comments? So this was the first one. So maybe I talked a little more than I should have. We'll try to balance that out more in the next ones. Yeah, I put my email in there. You can email me or with any questions you have or ideas, and it was in the chat. Comments, questions? I don't necessarily have to be, I have a 1 o'clock, but it can be pushed a little bit, but so I can hang out if anybody wants to talk about anything.
Like all the things that you find out about an individual, like when you are working with them, that really helps you develop the customized employment. It helps you, it guides you into leading, like, when you're going to talk to different business owners, because it helps you have faith in that individual, like you really appreciate. You see like all the little things that normally people wouldn't get to see because you spent time with them. And it just seems like, it really helps you, with then starting into the customized employment and searching for the different, job areas and the different, like the 20 themes, or not the 20 themes, but the 3 themes, and then the 20 businesses under there. You can say, oh, well, maybe this one didn't work out, but then we got the next one, go down through, and kind of, following those steps. But it really helps you believe in the person themselves, like you can see the value that individual has. And I think that's the real importance of discovery leading into customized employment. They definitely go hand in hand.
Absolutely. I think at the end, if you think of it, the discovery is really for you. It's for you to believe in the person and be prepared when you do. It's like, that's one really a great way to look at it, is discovery is in your best interest because you don't want to get to job development and not know the person, because then you're not going to be good at it. You're not going to be helpful to the person, useful to them at all. So that's a great test. Is discovery ever? Well, do I have what I need? Do we have those themes? Do we have, how are they? How are they awesome? Like, how will you describe the person in a way that as somebody who can be an asset, right? In many different ways. What are their geniuses? So I think that's a great test. That's the point of discovery is to prepare you for job development so you can be effective. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. All right. Well,
Russell, hey,
yeah.
this is Monica. I
Hey, Monica.
apologize. I had something come up here and it was like,
okay.
okay. But I see you're recording this.
Yes.
Okay, so will you send me a copy? And again, I apologize for not being able to jump on in time.
That's okay. Yeah. That was, we'll figure out where to put that. And that was, let's see, Lydia, thank you so much for that reminder where you record this. So yeah, we'll figure out where to get that. It'll be recorded online and we'll post that somewhere so everybody can see it. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
we so appreciate you all taking the time. We know it's not easy to find moments in a day to add additional activities that are a little bit outside of your routine or normal flow. So thank you so much, and thank you all for the kind comments in the chat.
Cool. Yep. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Denise. Thanks, Nancy.
I like that big hand coming across.
Yeah, right.
All right. Thank
Yeah.
y'all so much.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Fine.